Welcome back to Harbor. Well, a Nigerian man radicalized in Yemen tried to kill hundreds of people by blowing himself up in an airplane over Detroit. He failed, thank God. What did we learn, and how can the United States stop more young men from going down that same path? Ershad Manjoo is the director of the Moral Courage Project at NYU, New York University up here in New York, and creator of the Emmy-nominated PBS film Faith Without Fear. She's also the author of The Trouble with Islam Today. You know what we don't know. What's the trouble with Yemen? We have diplomatic relations with that country. We're sending people back there. I love this guy that we sent back there to be rehabilitated to become an artist or an art student. He's apparently one of the guys who perpetrated this attempt on that plane.
Well, you know, you mentioned my film Faith Without Fear. 3 years ago, Chris, I was in Yemen to film that documentary for PBS. And I actually interviewed Osama bin Laden's former bodyguard, who, by the way, and this is very important to keep in mind, was supposed to be an ex-jihadi. In other words, the Yemeni government allowed me access to him precisely because they wanted to showcase this deprogramming initiative that they had proudly undertaken. This guy was exactly the opposite of a rehab case. He, in fact, told me on camera that he wishes that he had never left Sheikh Osama, as he called him, not even for 1 hour. And he then went on to explain his commitment to global jihad to the point
why would the Yemeni government say this guy was reformed?
Well, they want the United States and others to believe that that's the case. It's good for diplomatic relations. It's good for the image of Yemen. But understand this. I turned around to my government-assigned handler and shrugged my shoulders as if to ask, why am I hearing this from an ex-jihadi? And the government-assigned handler gave me the thumbs up as if to say, go ahead, keep interviewing him. And afterwards, I said to this guy, why did you let me persist with the interview? This is making Yemen look very, very bad. And he said, that's exactly the point. Our program to, de-radicalize these people is not working, and the stakes are too high for wishful thinking, Ershad. He said, tell the world
the United States government has been trying to clear out Gitmo. I have been arguing for a long time. There's people that commit crimes, you punish them. There are people that get killed in action, they're dead. What do you do with people that are picked up in action who are clearly the enemies of the United States government for whom you can't prove a crime? They're our enemies. Why do we ever let them go? They're our enemies. They're warriors. The war ain't over. Why do we let them go? That's my question.
Well, as you know, there's been a long debate about whether they should be given sort of their day in court in a civilian court versus a military tribunal.
They haven't committed a crime. What do you do with them?
Them is the point.
They're warriors.
Give them their day in court is the point that others are making.
Well, this jihadi, you broke this guy's code. You said, are you a jihadist? He said, yeah. That wasn't too hard, was it?
Well, it wasn't too hard, especially when he said that he wanted to recruit his 5-year-old son to become a martyr, for God's sake.
Here's the United States. You live in this country, you teach at NYU, my kids go there. It's a hell of a country, the greatest country in the history of man. We got to defend ourselves. We got to get on airplanes and stop people from killing us. All right? This isn't a game. This isn't a civil liberties examination or a trial run. It's the real damn thing.
No dress rehearsal.
Okay, what are we going to do about keeping killers off our airplanes?
Listen, Chris, you've heard me say this before. I'll say it again because it can't be said enough. We have to, in this country, distinguish between moderate Muslims and reform-minded Muslims. The moderates are part of the problem.
We want somebody making $8 an hour to do that?
No, what I'm saying is that that's a crisis-driven solution you're talking about. You already discussed that with your first two guests. You're talking to somebody here who is speaking from the inside of the faith of Islam.
Ershad, you're a professor, you're academically qualified, but if I put you at the airport over in Yemen and you had to decide who gets on the plane and you're standing in line as they rush by, how do you know?
Okay, you know what? I personally have been screened more than once on many an occasion, and I'll tell you why I don't mind that. It was said earlier, I'll say it again, that I am a member of the public. As a Muslim, I am no less a member of the public than you are, and that means that the public safety issue that is, front and center here affects me as much as it does you. Therefore, Chris, I am willing to be patted down twice, even 3 times.
Okay, you look Middle Eastern, I think it's fair to say, because of everything about you. You get stopped in an airplane and somebody says, okay, you're traveling without a lot of luggage. You just bought your ticket in cash. You're not getting on the plane. Now, that to me sounds pretty peremptory, and that's just going to make a lot of enemies in the world. Short of that, you say, all right, let's come in this room over here.
I'm going to stop you right there. No, it's not going to make a lot of enemies in the world if you point out, as we must, that the vast majority of Al-Qaeda's victims are fellow Muslims themselves. In other words, taking somebody off of a plane in order to protect other people, including Muslims,
is this a general attitude that people will have?
Is something that we need to be willing to do.
Is this a general attitude?
Listen, it's something that when you explain this, particularly to a new generation of Muslims, They understand that this is the kind of information that is being kept from them from the jihadi propagandists and the moderate Muslims who are not challenging the jihadi ideology enough.
Here's my concern, Irshad, and it comes down to numbers. It reminds me of those MIRV missiles that we still have in our silos. You got 10 warheads on it. You fire them all at once. They all come out in one big silo, one booster rocket. They go in 10 different directions. You got to stop all 10 of them. Somewhere over in Yemen tonight, there's a guy listening to this on television, watching CNN or whatever, listening to Al Jazeera, and he's thinking, well, we didn't get through this time because the guy screwed up on the detonator, or he didn't put his syringe in right, or some passenger had to jump him. Next time we'll have them do it in the bathroom. Next time we'll come up with a better chemical that's more ignitive. And next time we'll blow that damn plane up over Omaha.
Yeah.
That's what I'm afraid. Did you ever read the paper today? They're thinking through this every day.
What is the premise on which they are operating, these people? They're operating on the premise. No, listen, let me finish.
To be too brutal about it.
They are operating on the premise that the West is slaughtering Muslims, when the reality is that 98% of al-Qaeda's victims in the last 2 years alone have been fellow Muslims. This is what these people don't know. This is what needs to get through to them.
The war has started.
This is what the president
and what do you do to the people that have already started?
The message be heard.
I'm completely with you. And I do believe in a world of 1 billion Islamic people, the one thing you don't want to happen is an East-West war.
Right.
The one thing you don't want to do is make people choose sides on the basis of religion. The problem is now we know there are several thousand people out there right now tonight planning against us to kill us. That's the short-term problem. And by the way, as I said a few minutes ago in the earlier segment, the minute a plane blows up, we're going to be living in a different cosmos.
That's right.
The American people that are civil libertarian right now are going to be a hell of a lot less civil libertarian.
Or they'll be silent because they don't have the answers.
So it's going to get further and further. This country's going to go further and further right in the way it handles this.
Yeah.
Now, so we have to think about that.
Right. Invest in reform-minded Muslims. Invest in reform-minded Muslims who are speaking from within the faith. They are not, outside of it. And they are pointing out to moderates and others that we need to take responsibility here. We need to engage in moral courage of our own because we are all in this together.
How many fathers are there out there like this Nigerian gentleman who had the courage to call up the United States Embassy in Lagos and say, my son is troubled, he's dangerous, he may be radicalized. You've got to watch him on airplanes. By the way, the State Department ought to catch the person who took that information and didn't use it. Yeah. Because that person ought to be in trouble.
Total
I want to know why that person didn't immediately call Washington and say, I got a hot one here.
That's right.
Because the guy I trust just told me his kid's dangerous.
They will argue that they did cable Washington, but Washington said that it didn't have enough evidence in order to nab this guy and put him on the no-fly list.
Well, let me just tell you this, there's no such person as Washington.
Bungling.
First of all, you just made a mistake.
No.
There's no such person as Washington. There's a human being that took that call who didn't do anything with it.
Well, this is exactly the point. And so there's bureaucratic bungling all along. And you know that the buck will be passed because that's how the good folks in Washington work, as in any capital, in any administrative capital.
The president said today we have a systemic problem. I think that's progress. The system ain't working. Thank you, Irshad. Please come back again. I hope we don't need you in these kind of circumstances, but I'm telling you, the world will turn a few more times, and when this happens,
you are right.
It's going to be a different world because there's not going to be any more nicety about it.
That's why
you're not getting on an airplane if you're a slight problem.
That is why, as a Muslim, I'm putting myself front and center in this fight too. Thanks.
Well, I hope everybody's as reasonable as you and that guy's father. Up next.